My son stole my necklace and all my family heirlooms, sold them to a pawn shop for pennies to buy gaming equipment for his streaming career. So I gave him two choices. My son Nathan was 19 and still living at home while going to community college. I'd raised him alone after his dad left when he was 5, working 2 jobs to keep us afloat. Nathan was always a good kid, helped around the house, got decent grades, never gave me trouble. He got into gaming during high school, but it was just normal teenage stuff, playing with friends online after homework. Everything changed when he started watching these gaming streamers who made millions playing video games. He became obsessed with becoming a professional gamer and started skipping classes to practice. I told him he could game all he wanted after he finished his degree, but he said I didn't understand that gaming was a real career now. He set up this whole streaming setup in his room with lights and cameras using his birthday money. He'd stream for 12 hours straight to his 10 viewers, thinking he'd blow up any day. Then he started asking for money for better equipment. Said he needed a new graphics card, better monitor, professional microphone, all this stuff that cost thousands. I told him to get a part-time job if he wanted expensive toys. He threw a fit saying I was sabotaging his dreams and that other parents supported their kids' passions. 2 months ago, I went to get my mother's necklace from my jewelry box for my cousin's wedding. The box was empty. Not just the necklace. Everything was gone. My wedding ring from my failed marriage that I kept to sell for Nathan's college. My grandmother's pearl earrings. The tennis bracelet I bought myself when I got promoted. Everything. I asked Nathan and he said he didn't know anything about it. Suggested maybe I misplaced them or we got robbed. But nothing else was missing and there was no sign of break-in. I let it go thinking maybe I was going crazy from work stress. Then I noticed Nathan had all this new gaming stuff. 3 monitors, some chair that cost $2,000, a keyboard that lit up like a rainbow, professional streaming camera. When I asked how he afforded it, he said he'd been saving up from streaming donations. I checked his streaming account and he'd made maybe $50 total in 6 months. That's when I went into his room while he was at class and found receipts in his trash. Everything was bought with cash from a pawn shop downtown. The dates matched exactly when my jewelry went missing. The pawn shop receipt showed my mother's necklace sold for $800 when it was worth $5,000. He'd basically given away family heirlooms for pennies to buy gaming garbage. I didn't confront him right away. Instead, I called my brother Keith, who owned an electronics repair shop, told him everything and asked for his help. Keith was furious and said he'd handle it. While Nathan was at class, Keith came over with his tools. We carefully opened up every piece of Nathan's new equipment. Keith installed these tiny devices he used for testing repairs that would cause random power surges. Not enough to be dangerous, but enough to fry circuits over time. He also adjusted Nathan's internet router to randomly throttle his connection during peak streaming hours. Within a week, Nathan's monitors started flickering. His fancy keyboard would type random letters. His mouse would freeze during crucial gaming moments. His stream would cut out constantly. He was losing viewers and getting frustrated. He took everything back to the store, but since he'd bought it all cash from different places, he couldn't return anything without receipts which he'd thrown away. He tried to get warranty repairs, but the stores said the damage was from power surges, which weren't covered. The best part was when Nathan's streaming computer completely died during his biggest stream ever. Some popular streamer had randomly joined his game and 20,000 people were watching. Right as Nathan was about to win and get noticed, everything shut down. By the time he got back online, everyone was gone, and the popular streamer had blocked him for wasting his time. Nathan spent the next month trying to fix everything. He drained his savings, maxed out the credit card I'd stupidly co-signed for him, even sold his car to buy replacement equipment. But Keith kept visiting when Nathan wasn't home and the problems kept happening. Nathan started blaming our house's electricity and demanded I pay for an electrician. I said I'd handled it and called my friend Robert, who was an electrician. Robert came over, pretended to check everything, and said the issue was Nathan's equipment drawing too much power. He recommended Nathan use only one device at a time. Nathan lost it and said I was trying to ruin his career. Finally, after Nathan's 5th computer crashed, he broke down crying. Said his life was over, his streaming career was dead, and he'd wasted all this money. That's when I told him I knew about the jewelry. I showed him the pawn shop receipts I'd gotten from the owner after explaining the situation. Nathan tried to deny it, then said he'd pay me back when he made it big streaming. I laughed and told him about Keith's devices, about Robert lying, about how I'd orchestrated everything. He called me evil and said I'd destroyed his dreams. I told him he destroyed my memories first. Those jewelry pieces were all I had left of my mother and grandmother who raised me. He sold my history for some stupid lights and a fancy chair. I gave Nathan 2 choices. He can move out right now with just the clothes on his back, or he can stay here and work full-time to pay me back every single penny those heirlooms were worth. Nathan sits on the couch staring at his hands like they belong to someone else. I watch the reality sink in across his face. He has no car anymore because he sold it for more broken equipment. He has no money for rent or deposit anywhere. He has no friends left to crash with because he cut them all off to stream 12 hours a day to strangers who didn't care about him. He looks up at me with these hollow eyes and asks how much he owes. $5,000 for the necklace alone, I tell him, plus another $3,000 for the other pieces. His face goes completely white. He opens his mouth, but nothing comes out. I can see him doing the math in his head, trying to figure out how he'd ever pay that back. $8,000. He makes $0 right now. He has negative money with that maxed out credit card. I cross my arms and wait for his answer, even though we both know he only has one choice. Nathan chooses to stay because leaving would mean sleeping on the street. That night we sit at the kitchen table and I lay out the terms like a contract. He has 1 week to find a full-time job. Once he's working, he pays me $400 every month until the debt is cleared. He follows a 10 p.m. curfew every night, no exceptions. And here's the part that makes his jaw clench. 0 gaming and 0 streaming until he's paid back at least half the total. I watch him struggle not to argue. His hands keep clenching into fists and then releasing. His leg bounces under the table. He wants to scream at me, but he knows he has no leverage here. Finally, he asks if he can at least keep his phone. Yes, I tell him, but I'm blocking his credit card from any gaming purchases since I'm the co-signer who'll be stuck paying his debt when he defaults. He nods slowly. He signs nothing because this isn't a real contract, but we both know he's trapped. Nathan starts job hunting the next morning. I hear him in his room typing on his laptop, probably filling out applications online. When I leave for my first job, he's still at it. I spend the whole day at work feeling this weird mix of satisfaction and something else I don't want to think about too hard. The satisfaction makes sense. He stole from me and now he's facing consequences. But there's this other feeling underneath, something that almost feels like guilt, and I push it down every time it surfaces. When I get home that evening, Nathan's sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop. He tells me he has 3 interviews lined up for tomorrow. His voice sounds flat and defeated. I ask him what kind of jobs, and he says fast food, retail, warehouse work, places that hire anyone with a pulse. I nod and tell him good luck. He doesn't respond. Later, I see him staring at his resume on the screen. 6 months of failed streaming, declining grades at community college, no real work experience. He's 19 years old and his resume makes him look unemployable. I almost feel bad for him. Almost. Keith calls me 2 days later. He says he needs to talk about Nathan and asks if I can meet him for coffee. We meet at the diner near his shop. My brother looks uncomfortable the moment I sit down. He orders coffee and doesn't touch it. Finally, he tells me he's been thinking about what we did to Nathan's equipment. I feel my defenses go up immediately. Keith says the kid deserved consequences, sure, but maybe we went too far. Especially that big streaming moment with 20,000 people watching. That could have actually led somewhere, Keith says. I remind him that Nathan stole our mother's necklace. Keith nods but then says something that makes me angry. He says Mom would be more upset about her grandson being deliberately humiliated than about jewelry she never got to wear anyway. I tell Keith he doesn't know what Mom would have wanted. Keith looks at me sadly and says he knows her well enough. We finish our coffee in silence. When I leave, Keith's words keep playing in my head, and I hate it. Nathan gets hired at a warehouse distribution center. $13 an hour, 40 hours a week, starting immediately. He comes home after his first shift looking like he got hit by a truck. He collapses on the couch without even making it to his room. His clothes are soaked with sweat. His hands have blisters forming. I do the math in my head while he sits there breathing hard. After taxes, he'll make about $450 a week. With his $400 monthly payment to me, plus his credit card minimum payment of $150, he'll have almost nothing left. I mention he should probably budget for gas and food. Nathan laughs this bitter, broken sound. He sold his car, remember? He's been taking the bus 2 hours each way. 4 hours of commuting every day. I look at him slumped on the couch and feel that uncomfortable feeling again. I ignore it and go to my room. 2 weeks into Nathan's warehouse job, Caroline calls me about her wedding. She's excited, talking about flowers and the venue and the guest list. Then she casually asks about my mother's necklace. She was looking forward to seeing me wear it, she says. I have to tell her what happened. The whole story comes out. Nathan stealing everything, selling it to the pawn shop, using the money for gaming equipment. Caroline gets quiet. When she finally speaks, her voice is different. She says she remembers Nathan being such a thoughtful kid when he was younger. She asks if I've considered that maybe Nathan was struggling with something deeper than gaming obsession. Maybe depression. Maybe feeling lost after his dad abandoned him and started a whole new family. I brush off her concern. I tell her Nathan made his choices and now he's dealing with the consequences. But after we hang up, her words stick with me. I remember how Nathan changed after his dad got remarried. How he stopped talking about his father entirely. How he threw himself into gaming like he was trying to disappear into it. The house phone rings on a Wednesday afternoon. I'm home between my 2 jobs. The automated message says Nathan's credit card account is 60 days past due. Balance of $3,200. Minimum payment now $250 monthly with late fees. I wait until Nathan gets home from the warehouse. He looks exhausted as always. I confront him about the credit card debt. At first, he tries to deflect, but I don't let him. Finally, he admits he'd been using it for months before the jewelry theft. Smaller equipment upgrades. Paying to promote his streams to get more viewers. He thought he'd pay it back when he made it big. When he got famous. When the money started rolling in. I stare at my son and realize he was living in a complete fantasy world. The minimum payment is now $250 monthly. Combined with his payment to me, that's $650. He makes about $1,800 monthly after taxes. Minus 4 hours of bus fare daily. Minus food. He's going to barely survive. I see him doing the same math and watching his face crumble. I can't sleep on Saturday night. Around 3 a.m., I get up for water and find Nathan awake in the dark living room. He's sitting on the couch staring at his phone screen. The blue light makes his face look ghostly. I ask what he's doing. He doesn't answer at first. Then he turns his phone toward me. It's his old streaming channel. Messages from his regular viewers. The few people who actually watched him consistently. One message says, "Hope you're okay, man. You just disappeared." Another says, "Miss your streams? You were getting really good." Nathan's voice cracks when he tells me he had to post that he was taking an indefinite break. I see tears on his face. This is the first time since I revealed the sabotage that I've seen him actually cry instead of just being angry. He's not crying about the debt or the job or the consequences. He's crying about the people who cared enough to ask where he went. I don't know what to say, so I don't say anything. I go back to bed and lie awake until morning. Keith shows up at the house 3 weeks after Nathan started working. He doesn't call first, just appears at the door. He says he needs to talk to both of us. Nathan's home because it's his day off. Keith sits Nathan down on the couch. I stand in the doorway. Keith tells Nathan that he's the one who sabotaged all the equipment. That I asked him to do it as revenge for the jewelry theft. That he installed devices to cause power surges and throttled the internet connection. Nathan looks between us with this expression I've never seen before. Complete betrayal. He asks Keith why he'd do that. Nathan always looked up to Keith. Keith was the cool uncle who understood technology and didn't judge him for gaming. Keith says he thought he was helping his sister teach a lesson. But watching Nathan's face right now, Keith's not sure the lesson was worth the method we used. Nathan stands up and walks to his room without a word. The door closes quietly. Somehow that's worse than if he'd slammed it. Nathan stops talking to me except when absolutely necessary. He tells me when he's paid me for the month. He asks if I need anything from the store. That's it. The silence in the house becomes this heavy, oppressive thing. I can't stand it, but I don't know how to fix it. One day while Nathan's at work, I go into his room to put away his laundry. I'm putting clothes in his dresser when I see a notebook corner sticking out from under his mattress. I pull it out. Inside are detailed budget calculations. Pages of them. Nathan had been planning to pay me back once his streaming took off. Lists of subscriber goals and donation targets. And then on the last page, a list of things he wanted to buy me. A replacement necklace. A vacation somewhere nice. A new car to replace my aging one. The notebook is dated from 2 months before I discovered the theft. Before everything fell apart. I sit on his bed holding this notebook and realize Nathan actually believed his fantasy would work. He thought he'd make enough money streaming to fix everything and give me a better life. He wasn't just being selfish. He was being delusional, yes. But he wanted to make things right. I put the notebook back exactly where I found it and leave his room. I don't tell him I found it. 3 weeks into Nathan's warehouse job, my phone rings at work. The number shows up as the distribution center where Nathan's employed. I step outside to take the call. The supervisor introduces himself as Greg Smith and says he needs to talk to me about Nathan. My stomach drops. Greg explains that Nathan fell asleep during his shift today, nearly caused an accident when he nodded off while operating a pallet jack. This is his second warning this month. One more incident and Nathan's fired. Greg asks if everything's okay at home because Nathan seems exhausted all the time. I thank him for calling and hang up. When Nathan gets home that evening, he looks worse than I've ever seen him. His eyes have dark circles underneath. His shoulders slump forward, and he's moving like every step hurts. I ask him about work, and he sits down heavily on the couch. He tells me he's been doing mandatory overtime, 50 hours every week, trying to pay down his credit card faster. The bus route to the warehouse takes 2 hours each way, so he's leaving the house at 5 in the morning and getting home after 8 at night. He's working 10-hour shifts, riding 4 hours daily on public transportation and barely sleeping. When I suggest he cut back the overtime, he shakes his head. The credit card interest is eating him alive. Every month he pays $250 and the balance barely moves because of the interest charges. He can't afford to work less. I watch him drag himself to his room and realize something I didn't want to admit. The punishment I designed isn't teaching him anything about consequences anymore. It's just breaking him down physically, grinding him into nothing. This isn't justice. This is just cruelty wearing a different mask. I spend the weekend thinking about that notebook hidden under Nathan's mattress, the one where he planned to pay me back, where he listed gifts he wanted to buy me once streaming made him rich. He wasn't just being selfish when he stole the jewelry. He was delusional, yes, but he genuinely believed he'd fix everything. I look at my bank account on Monday morning. My emergency savings sits there, money I've been putting away for years. $3,200 would wipe out Nathan's credit card completely. It would also wipe out most of my safety net. I stare at the number for a long time. Then I call the credit card company. The representative asks for the account number and I give her Nathan's information. I verify my identity as the cosigner. I tell her I want to pay off the entire balance. She processes the payment and confirms the account is now at zero. I hang up and immediately wonder if I just made a huge mistake. 2 weeks later, Nathan's monthly statement arrives in the mail. He opens it at the kitchen table and stares at the paper for a full minute without moving. Then he brings it to me, his face confused. He asks what happened. I tell him I paid it off using my emergency savings. He just stands there holding the statement. I explain that he still owes me for the jewelry, every cent of that debt remains. But I won't watch him destroy his health over credit card interest that I helped create by co-signing in the first place. Nathan asks why I'd help him after everything he did. I tell him because I'm still his mother even when I'm angry at him. Because watching him work himself into exhaustion isn't teaching him responsibility, it's just hurting him. Nathan's eyes get wet and he thanks me quietly. I don't mention the notebook. I don't tell him that finding his plans to pay me back changed how I see what he did. Some things he doesn't need to know. The doorbell rings on a Saturday afternoon 3 weeks later. I answer it and find a girl I vaguely recognize from Nathan's high school years standing on the porch. She's got dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she's wearing a college sweatshirt. She asks if Nathan's home, says her name is Bonnie McIntyre. I remember her now from when Nathan was 16, before the streaming obsession took over. She used to come over to study with him. I tell her Nathan's home and call for him. When Nathan comes out and sees Bonnie, his whole body goes tense. She tells him she's been messaging him for months with no response. She's worried because he cut off all his friends when he got obsessed with streaming, and she heard through other people that something bad happened. Nathan tries to brush her off, says he's been busy with work. Bonnie doesn't accept that. She tells him she drove 40 minutes to check on him because that's what real friends do. She asks if they can talk privately. Nathan looks at me, then back at Bonnie, and finally nods. They go out to the front porch and I go to the kitchen, but the window's open and I can hear everything. Bonnie tells Nathan that his real friends missed him. The people who actually knew him, who cared about him before streaming, they didn't disappear. He disappeared on them. She says streaming viewers aren't the same as people who know your history, who remember when you were just a regular person. Nathan's voice cracks when he responds. He admits he threw away real relationships for an audience that vanished the second his content stopped. He tells her about the equipment failures, about losing everything, about how nobody stuck around when the streams ended. Bonnie asks if he learned anything from it. Nathan says he learned that fame isn't friendship, that thousands of viewers don't equal one real person who actually cares. I hear Bonnie suggest they grab coffee sometime, try to rebuild what they had before. Nathan agrees, and they exchange numbers again. When Bonnie leaves and Nathan comes back inside, he looks lighter somehow. My phone rings 2 days later while I'm at work. The caller ID shows the pawn shop downtown. I answer, and Mark Buchanan identifies himself as the owner. He says he has unexpected news about my mother's necklace. Someone came into his shop yesterday asking about estate jewelry from that specific era. They're a collector, apparently, and they noticed my mother's necklace in his display case. The collector is willing to pay $3,000 for it. Mark says he wanted to call me first before selling it to this collector. He'll give me the chance to buy it back for the original $800 he paid Nathan plus his standard markup of $200. $1,000 total. I'm shocked he'd even offer this. Most pawn shop owners wouldn't bother. Mark says he felt bad about the situation when I explained it months ago, how Nathan stole family heirlooms. He figured I might want the chance to get it back. I tell him yes, absolutely yes, and ask when I can come by. He says the shop's open until 7 tonight. I thank him repeatedly and hang up. That evening when Nathan gets home from work, I tell him about Mark's call. For the first time in weeks, I see actual hope in Nathan's face. He asks if we could try to get the necklace back together. I tell him the total cost is $1,000. Nathan immediately says he'll pay half. I'm surprised because that's almost everything he's managed to save after paying me his monthly amount and covering his expenses. He says the necklace matters more than his savings. We agree to go to the pawn shop the next day after Nathan gets off work. The pawn shop is located in a strip mall between a check cashing place and a nail salon. Nathan and I walk in together, and Mark Buchanan greets us from behind the counter. He's an older man with gray hair and reading glasses hanging on a chain around his neck. He tells us he's glad we came and reaches under the counter. When he brings out the necklace, I stop breathing for a second. It looks exactly like I remember. The delicate gold chain, the small diamond pendant that my father gave my mother on their 20th anniversary. Mark sets it on the counter between us. The price is $1,000 with his markup included. Nathan pulls out his wallet and counts out $500 in cash. It's money he's been saving from his paychecks. $20 here, $50 there. I add my $500 and Mark counts the bills carefully. He puts the necklace in a small velvet pouch and hands it to me. Nathan speaks quietly, telling me he's sorry for selling it in the first place. I take the necklace out of the pouch and put it on right there in the shop. The weight of it around my neck feels right. Mark watches us and then tells Nathan something I wasn't expecting. He says taking responsibility like this, paying to fix his mistake, is worth more than any streaming career ever could be. Nathan nods and we leave the shop together. The necklace sits against my chest where it belongs, and something shifts between Nathan and me. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the beginning of understanding. That evening after dinner, Nathan and I sit at the kitchen table together. It's the first real conversation we've had since I revealed the sabotage. Nathan starts talking without me prompting him. He tells me he understands now that the streaming dream was an escape. After his dad remarried and started a new family, after years of watching his father build a life that didn't include him, Nathan felt worthless. Streaming offered a fantasy where he could matter, where thousands of people would value him. I listen, and then admit my own truth. Watching him throw away his future for gaming made me feel like I'd failed as a parent. Like I couldn't compete with internet fantasies, like everything I sacrificed raising him alone meant nothing. Nathan's voice breaks when he says he never meant to hurt me. He genuinely thought he'd make enough money streaming to pay me back and prove he wasn't worthless. He thought he'd buy me a better life and show his dad that he amounted to something without him. We're both crying now at the kitchen table. I tell Nathan he was never worthless to me, not even when I was furious about the theft. He was my son who I raised and loved, and no streaming career or lack of one changes that. Nathan reaches across the table and squeezes my hand. We sit there for a while just crying together, finally saying the things we should have said months ago. After we both calm down, I tell Nathan everything about the sabotage. How Keith installed the devices in his equipment. How Robert lied about the electrical problems. How I planned every equipment failure to happen at the worst possible moments. I describe orchestrating his biggest streaming failure when 20,000 people were watching. Nathan listens without interrupting. When I finish, he asks me a question I wasn't ready for. He asks if I feel better now that I got my revenge. I have to sit with that question for a minute. Then I admit the truth. No, I don't feel better. Watching him suffer didn't actually heal my hurt over losing my mother's things. The revenge felt good in the moment, but it didn't fix anything. Nathan says he deserved consequences for stealing from me. But the sabotage felt like I wanted to destroy him completely, not teach him a lesson. He says it felt like I wanted to break him down until there was nothing left. I realize he's right. The revenge wasn't about teaching him responsibility. It was about making him hurt as much as I hurt. We agree that we both handled things badly. Him with the theft, me with the revenge. Now we need to figure out how to move forward without causing more hurt. Nathan suggests we need new terms. A better arrangement than the one I forced on him when he had no choice. Nathan proposes something I didn't expect. He'll continue paying me back for the jewelry, but at a reduced rate of $200 monthly instead of $400. That way he can also save money for his own future and rebuild his life. In exchange, he wants to return to community college part-time and focus on his classes instead of streaming. He'll keep working at the warehouse but drop to 40 hours instead of 50 with overtime. I consider his proposal. It makes sense and it's more sustainable than grinding him into exhaustion. But I add one condition before agreeing. He has to see the college counselor about career planning and figuring out what he actually wants to do with his life beyond gaming. Nathan asks for the counselor's name and I tell him to ask for Alexander Powell when he goes back to register for classes. Nathan agrees to my condition. We shake hands across the kitchen table on the new terms. The house feels different after that conversation. Less like a war zone where two enemies live, and more like a home where two hurt people are trying to heal together. Nathan goes to his room and I sit at the table for a while longer. The necklace is still around my neck and I touch it with my fingers. My mother would probably be disappointed in how I handled things with Nathan. But maybe she'd be proud that we're trying to fix it now. Nathan registers for classes the following week and makes an appointment with Alexander Powell, the college counselor. He starts meeting with Alexander every week on Thursday afternoons. After his first session, Nathan comes home looking different. Lighter somehow, like someone lifted weight off his shoulders. He tells me that Alexander asked him what he'd want to do if streaming wasn't an option, and Nathan realized he'd never actually thought about alternatives. He'd been so focused on gaming as his only path that he never considered other options. Alexander helped him identify that he's actually interested in technology and digital media, but he was approaching it through streaming instead of education. The counselor suggested Nathan consider studying computer science or digital marketing, fields where his gaming knowledge could be relevant but with actual career prospects. Nathan seems excited about these possibilities in a way that's different from his streaming obsession. This excitement is grounded in reality instead of fantasy. He enrolls in 2 classes for the next semester starting in January. Introduction to Computer Science and Business Communications. He shows me the course descriptions and talks about what he'll learn. I haven't seen him this genuinely interested in education since before the streaming took over his life. 3 months pass. Nathan keeps working at the warehouse, attending his counseling sessions and preparing for his classes to start. Then one evening he comes home with news. He got promoted to a supervisor position with a raise to $17 an hour. He's excited for the first time in months, talking fast about how the promotion happened. His manager told him the promotion came because he showed up consistently and worked hard even when he was exhausted. Reliability matters more than talent in most jobs, his manager said. Nathan tells me he finally understands what I was trying to teach him about real work versus fantasy careers. Streaming promised quick success and fame, but real careers are built through showing up day after day and doing the work. He asks if he can increase his monthly payment to me now that he's making more money. He wants to pay $250 instead of $200, trying to pay off the debt faster so we can fully move past everything that happened. I agree to the increase and tell him I'm proud of his progress. Nathan smiles, and says he's starting to be proud of himself too. Caroline's wedding was 3 weeks away when the invitation arrived in our mailbox. Thick cream paper with gold edges that reminded me of my mother's fancy stationery. I held the necklace up to the light in my bedroom, watching it catch the afternoon sun through the window, and decided I'd wear it to the wedding. Nathan knocked on my door that evening while I was getting ready for my second job and asked if I was really going to wear it. I told him yes, that I wanted our family to see it, and he nodded slowly before saying he'd come with me if that was okay. The wedding was at a hotel downtown with white flowers everywhere, and relatives I hadn't seen in years crowding the lobby before the ceremony. I wore a simple navy dress with the necklace, and within minutes of arriving, 3 different aunts came up to compliment it. My Aunt Susan touched it gently and said it looked exactly like she remembered from when my mother wore it to family gatherings. Nathan stood next to me in his one good suit that we'd bought at a thrift store, and when people asked him about school and work, he didn't make excuses or lie. He told my cousin Rachel that he'd made some bad choices, hurt me, but was trying to fix things now. Rachel looked surprised but squeezed his hand and said, "Everyone makes mistakes when they're young." During the reception, Caroline found me at our table and pulled me aside to the hallway near the bathrooms. She looked beautiful in her wedding dress, happy in a way that made her face glow, and she said she could see something different in both Nathan and me. "The pain changed you," she said. "Made you both face things you'd been avoiding." I started to respond, but she kept talking, saying that my mother would be proud of how we were handling this situation. Not the revenge or the theft, Caroline clarified, but the hard work of actually forgiving and rebuilding instead of just staying angry. I felt tears starting and blinked them back, realizing she was right about my mother. Mom always said family was more important than things, that people mattered more than jewelry or money or pride. She would have been heartbroken about the theft, but she would have cared more about whether Nathan and I could find our way back to each other. Caroline hugged me and went back to her new husband, and I returned to the table where Nathan was talking to Keith about something. That night after we got home, Nathan thanked me for letting him come to the wedding, said it meant a lot that I didn't exclude him from family events. I told him we were still family even when things were hard, and he smiled a little before heading to his room. Nathan's first semester back at community college started in January, and I watched him become a different person over those 4 months. He'd come home from the warehouse exhausted, but would still sit at the kitchen table with his textbooks, working through programming assignments or writing papers for his communications class. His computer science class was teaching him basic coding, and he'd explain concepts to me while making dinner, talking about variables and loops and functions with actual excitement in his voice. The business communications class taught him about professional writing and presentations, skills he said would help in any career he chose. I'd never seen him this engaged with school, not even in high school when he got decent grades. This was different. Focused energy instead of just going through motions. When his grades came in at the end of the semester, he showed me the transcript with a huge grin. B+ in computer science, A- in business communications. He'd worked hard for those grades, studying during his breaks at the warehouse and staying up late to finish assignments. We celebrated with takeout Chinese food, his favorite, and he told me about his plans for next semester. He wanted to take 2 more computer classes and maybe an economics course, building toward a degree in information systems. Nathan showed me websites for 4-year universities he was researching, places that had good technology programs and offered scholarships for transfer students. He'd printed out scholarship applications and was highlighting requirements, actually planning for a real future, instead of fantasizing about gaming fame. I watched him research schools on his laptop at the kitchen table one evening, making notes about deadlines and requirements, and felt something shift in my chest. This was the kid I'd raised, the one who used to plan things carefully and work toward actual goals. Streaming had taken him away from that person, made him chase impossible dreams, but now he was coming back. When I told him I was proud of his progress and how hard he'd been working, Nathan looked up from his laptop with wet eyes. He said he was grateful I didn't give up on him even when he gave up on himself, that he knew he'd been impossible to deal with during his streaming obsession. I hugged him across the table, awkward with the laptop between us, and told him I never stopped believing he could turn things around. He just needed to want it for himself instead of chasing what other people said success should look like. Keith came over for dinner on a Saturday evening 6 months after everything had blown up with the jewelry and the sabotage. I made pot roast with potatoes and carrots, Keith's favorite meal from when we were kids, and the three of us sat around our small dining table like we used to years ago. Nathan was quiet at first, pushing food around his plate, but then he looked at Keith and said, "Thank you." Keith put down his fork and asked what for, and Nathan said for being honest about the sabotage even though it was hard to hear. Knowing the truth hurt, Nathan explained, but it helped him understand the real impact of what he'd done when he stole the jewelry. If Keith had kept lying, Nathan said, he might have spent years thinking he was just unlucky with equipment instead of facing what he'd caused. Keith looked uncomfortable and apologized again for his role in the revenge, said he should have talked me out of it instead of helping. We all agreed that we'd handled the situation badly, that the theft was wrong, but the sabotage was wrong too. But we're family, I said, and families survive mistakes if they're willing to do the work of fixing things. Nathan actually laughed and said at least he learned expensive lessons about the difference between dreams and delusions. Keith smiled and offered to teach Nathan some basic electronics repair skills that could help with his technology career path. Nathan's face lit up at the idea, asking when they could start, and Keith said they could use his shop on weekends. I watched them make plans, my brother and my son talking about circuits and components, and felt grateful that Keith had stayed involved even after everything got messy. After dinner, Keith helped me wash dishes while Nathan cleared the table, and my brother said quietly that Nathan seemed like a completely different person than 6 months ago. I told him that hard lessons stick better than easy ones, even when the teaching methods are questionable. A year after Nathan stole the jewelry, I woke up on a Tuesday morning and realized we'd settled into something that felt almost normal. Nathan was already awake, getting ready for his early shift at the warehouse where he'd been promoted twice now. He worked 40 hours there and took 3 classes each semester, a schedule that kept him busy but not destroyed like before. He'd paid back $3,000 of the $5,000 he owed me, making his monthly payments without fail even when money was tight. I got up and made coffee, and Nathan joined me in the kitchen before heading out. We talked about his paper for his digital marketing class that was due next week, and he showed me his outline on his phone. The necklace sat in my jewelry box upstairs, but I wore it often now, sometimes just around the house when I wanted to feel close to my mother. Each time I put it on, I thought about how Nathan and I had survived our worst conflict, how we'd both been willing to face the ugly truth instead of running away. We weren't perfect, not even close. There was still tension sometimes when Nathan got frustrated with school or work, and he still resented what I'd done with the sabotage, even though he understood why I was hurt. But most nights we ate dinner together at the kitchen table, talking about his classes and my work and normal everyday things. We were building something real instead of living in fantasies about streaming fame or perfect revenge. Nathan told me last week that he was grateful the streaming career failed because it forced him to grow up, to face reality instead of hiding in games. I told him I was grateful he stayed and fought to make things right instead of running away like his father did when things got hard. We're okay now, not despite what happened, but because we both chose to face it honestly and do the hard work of rebuilding trust one day at a time.